innerhalb von Äthiopien gemeinsam mit der Zentralregierung zu befrieden, weil man hat schon den Eindruck, dass
I'm sorry, Norbert. I think we don't have any translation, or is it just me?
The sound quality isn't adequate for interpretation purposes.
No, the connection is too poor for translation.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry, Norbert. You have the floor again. I didn't have any translation. I think I heard you well enough.
The connection was too bad for translating.
Seemed to be the case. We give the floor to Norbert Neusser again, of course, so we can do his closing.
The connection quality was not adequate for interpretation purposes.
Mr.
Neusser, you have the floor. I would ask you to please remove your headphones.
Okay. So I continue in English. I just want to add what are the plans from from our Minister Havisto to solve these humanitarian problems, because they are getting stronger, because in agriculture there was not really work to be done. And the second one is how to continue to work together with the government in Addis Ababa to calm down the ethnic conflict, because it's ongoing, and we have a similar situation like it was in former Yugoslavia, that the whole country is going down. Thank you.
Thank you, Norbert, and thank you for being so flexible. We move on then to the next one, and I give the floor to Mick Wallace from the left.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to Mr. Havisto for his contribution. Do you agree at this stage that there's a recognition that war crimes have taken place and that Abiy Ahmed and Afwerki are clearly guilty of war crimes? And do you really think there's going to be an independent investigation? Will these two individuals be tried for war crimes? Surely, unless this happens, it makes a mockery of international law. Secondly, you talk about the so-called election process, and I agree with you, it is a so-called election process. Surely the EU isn't going to recognise these elections, given that it can be pretty selective about what elections it recognises across the world. But recognising these at the moment, with many of Abiy Ahmed's opponents in prison, makes it's just a joke. Thirdly, who is supplying Abiy Ahmed still with arms? He isn't making them himself. Somebody is giving them to him. Can we find that out? There is definitely countries continuing to give him arms to carry out war crimes. And lastly, he has support from world powers. Whether we like it or not, but the US, Russia, China are all still prepared to do business with him because they all want a piece of the action in the Horn of Africa. So why are we allowing this to happen? Abiy Ahmed would not be in power if he did not have support from world powers. We're not looking for an intervention, but these people, Abiy Ahmed should not get support from outside countries, or Al-Farki for that matter. And giving them support is helping them and supporting their war crimes. And that's the truth of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I give the floor to Jan Christoph Ochen, Deve, Renew.
Thank you, co-chairs. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Havisto as well for reporting back about his mission, and I'm wishing him good luck and success in this delicate affair. I want to ask him about the next steps he foresees or he would like to do in the different situations. First, concerning refugees. We already heard that we need a cooperation with Khartoum and the other capitals as well in order to have a safe return of refugees into the Tigray region. What does he think about the situation, and what does he foresee as next steps concerning this issue? Concerning the Nile waters, my colleague Javier Nat already highlighted the historical situation since 1959, and I want to reiterate the question of Maria Arena. So what can the European Union do in order to, from an outside perspective as a mediator, help that this situation does not escalate? But for me, most important is the situation for the people in Tigray. And we have a lot of reports about malnutrition and about a famine that is coming up. So I want to ask Mr. Havisto if he's in contact with the humanitarian aid organizations, and what is his assessment on the situation concerning malnutrition, concerning the access for humanitarian organizations, and what can he do in order to open this corridor for humanitarian organizations in order to provide help for the people. And lastly, concerning the elections, I mean, we have an oppression of the opposition in Ethiopia, and so you cannot talk about real elections. And I agree that you said the retreat of the Eritrean troops from Tigray is a key priority, and is the base for creating new stability and new, let's say, communication or discussion with the Tigrayans. But how do you assess this situation? Will not those elections bring even more tensions into the country? Thank you.
Thank you. Beata Kempe, Deve, ECR. Not connected. And then I wonder if Janina Oszoska is connected. Okay, Janina, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I am looking for. Yes, I'm sorry. Dziękuję panu Pekka Havisto za ciekawą propozycję.
I would like to thank for the very interesting proposal, the presentation. The humanitarian situation is very interesting because it obviously affects stability in the region. Before the conflict in Ethiopia, there were 12.5 million people there who required humanitarian aid, 2 million in Tigray alone. Now, the situation is far worse. 2.5 million people have no access to water, to basic supplies, to food, and the humanitarian aid workers are there's little they can do. Since the crisis began, the EU wanted humanitarian corridors to be opened, to be operated by NGOs. I wanted to ask the Minister, do you know whether anything has changed in that regard? I'd like to know more about the dramatic shortage of water in the border region. There is a major dam being built on the Nile, and a power plant is meant to be built there, but it's meant to provide access to water and electricity for people in Ethiopia. But 85% of the Nile water comes from the Ethiopian highlands and the Blue Nile. So the dam would be a major step forward for development in Ethiopia, but would compromise the situation in Sudan and perhaps lead to conflict. The Sudanese government believes that it will perhaps have advantages and benefits, but that nonetheless the dam in Sudan won't be as efficient if there no longer is enough water in the Nile. Do you have any additional information on this? Are the countries working together in relation to the water sources? Does the EU provide funds or considering providing funds for water development in both countries? Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues from AFID and DEVA, for your contributions and interesting questions and remarks. And now, Pekka, I give the floor back to you to respond to what you have heard from colleagues. Please.
Well, thank you, and very good and interesting interventions by members of parliament, members of committee, and very good questions. And I try to cover those that I'm able to cover. First, Mr. Rangel and several members of parliament asked actually about the regional dynamics, and if I'm looking first on the side of the dam, the Millennium Renaissance Dam that many of you mentioned, it is clear that it will be a major factor particularly for the production of electricity in Ethiopia, and it's this kind of symbol of national proudness. It actually has been built from the money of pockets of the ordinary citizens. There has been a collection of money from the ordinary citizens in Ethiopia for this huge project. So it's a national proudness issue, and it is clearly stated also openly by the government there. And then the problem occurs, as you rightly said, when we speak about the water situation in Sudan and in Egypt. Sudan and Egypt have a little bit different interest on this dam issue. Actually, for Sudan, the Renaissance Dam is not threatening their water, access to water or infrastructure so much, but they would like to know how this dam will be managed in the way that there are no flooding or any amount of the water that could destroy the dams on the Sudanese side. This is very important, open exchange of information. And then on Egypt more speaks about the water shortage. If the dam will be built, well, will there be enough water on the downriver of Nile? And now in these circumstances where Ethiopia is not negotiating, not with Sudan and not with Egypt. Egypt and Sudan has joined their forces and tried to pressure Ethiopia, and these talks are ongoing. And it's the European Union and actually US, we have a very key role in these talks. We are observers in these dam talks, and of course we have two kind of messages. First message, of course, to Ethiopia to come forward with all the technical data, come to the table. Now the second feeling is happening this summer, and it's obvious it will happen because this is the rainy season is coming, and the neighbors need information. And then in the long term, they need to come with the plan on how the dam, when it's ready, how it will be operated. And until they are doing that, of course, both Sudan and Egypt will be very suspicious. And as you can see, Egypt is even using very hostile language, war type of language, increasing its military capacity in the area, even threatening with the military operations if Ethiopia will not come to the negotiation table. And the European Union has a very, very crucial role in this through our EUSR, Alex Rondos. We have been all the time following the talks and been providing data and all kinds of technical assistance to parties in the talk. What the African Union and the current chair of African Union, Democratic Republic of Congo DRC can do in this. It's not obvious that they have been so successful so far, but it's very, very important that we work together with the African Union and as observers, European Union and US. And I know that behind the scenes, these talks and contacts are now all the time ongoing. There was also many questions about the humanitarian situation, current humanitarian situation on the ground, and while it has been a little bit improving the access since February, April, the main trouble with the humanitarian organizations is actually to safe access to Tigray and some locations in Tigray. When they go further, they meet military operations, and these military operations are nobody's informing about those to the humanitarian community. The situation is very dangerous for the humanitarian workers when the war is ongoing. One day this road is closed, another day another road is closed. They have to turn back from this village, they have to turn back from that village. And for humanitarian community, it's very, very difficult situation, a very risky situation that is currently ongoing. So the pressure towards the government has to continue to allow the free humanitarian access, and of course as to stopping of the hostilities. There was also a question about how this is interlinked to the Somalia situation and this very strange new triangle, which is also challenging the regional cooperation. It's not based no more nowadays so much on IGAD, which has been the traditional regional cooperation organization, but Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia, Mr. Farmajo, has been working together in this kind of triangle, and it's not very friendly triangle to other countries of the region, and that's the reason why we have also put a lot of pressure, of course, to Somalia to hold the elections, to President Farmajo to come back to the electoral process, and luckily this has we have been successful in that, so that Prime Minister Roble is now responsible for holding the elections in Somalia, and this hopefully gives some light to, for example, to Somalia-Kenya connections, which has been very, very bad recently. On the other regional countries like the Saudi Arabia and Emirates, there was the question also why we visited these and how can we manage cooperating with the countries with whom we have some other pending issues. We have been actually appealing very strongly both to Saudi Arabia and Arab Emirates that they should and could use their influence both to Ethiopia and Eritrea to come to the peaceful solution on the Gerd dam issue, and of course the peaceful solution in Tigray. And this dam issue and particularly the Al-Fasaka triangle issue are issues where the Arab countries can use their influence also by steering their investments and helping the parties to come to the table. And for example, Arab Emirates has been organizing several meetings on the dam issue between the relevant parties, and we have an excellent exchange of information with these players. There was also a question how we cooperate with the US and transatlantic cooperation at this stage, and as rightly mentioned by members of parliament, US has appointed a special envoy for the Horn of Africa, very, very experienced diplomat Jeffrey Feltman, who has a long UN background and now working for the US administration. And we are in contact with Mr. Feltman almost several times per week and try to coordinate our efforts and the reactions both by the European Union and the US side. And I think we have been very successful on that we have similar messages and we share openly information between us and as also mentioned, the G7 comments, all this is very valuable, that the international pressure goes to the same direction, and I think we work together. There was also a question, can the human rights assessment be neutral in these circumstances, particularly because part of the human rights assessment is done by national human rights organization. That was the precondition of the Ethiopians, that the UN High Representative of Human Rights can enter only with the national organization. And of course, you might ask if the national organization could be biased or something like that. But Madame Bachelet has convinced us that she will make her report independently and not be affected by the government of Ethiopia or national organizations of Ethiopia. So I trust on that. And when there was the question that has some human rights violations or war crimes occurred, of course, we have now the many organizations coming with independent reports, but I really recommend to wait for this UN High Commissioner of Human Rights report on this issue and then act accordingly. Of course, this issue also should be dealt in the UN Human Rights Council and so forth. For me, particularly the news of the violence against the women is incredible and something that probably not has happened in any wars or conflicts in that region. Maybe a word about what is the aim of Ethiopia. When I met the Ethiopian leadership in February, they really used this kind of language that they are going to destroy the Tigrayans, they are going to wipe out the Tigrayans for 100 years and so forth, which for me referred to very serious human rights atrocities and crimes as well. If you wipe out your national minority, what is it? It's you cannot destroy all the people, you cannot destroy all the population in Tigray, and I think that's very obvious that we have to react and because it looks for us like ethnic cleansing. It is a very serious act if this is true. Where are the arms coming from? Who is supporting? Of course, we see now the reaction by Prime Minister Abiy that when there is an increased pressure from European Union and US, he, so to say, turns to China, he turns to Russia. There is this kind of hostile language against Westerners now in Ethiopia. And I also want to warn against this part, because if they really choose this kind of language and rhetoric, this has meant now that our embassies in Addis have faced some protests, and people are on the streets, start to be hostile towards the Westerners and so forth. This is not a nice story at all, and this is also what we have been saying to government of Ethiopia, that if they want to turn this to some kind of hatred campaign against the Westerners, it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help any people in the country, but it doesn't help our cooperation either. And they now want to flag out that they have other friends than West as well. They have China, they have Russia, and so forth. And of course, this is a topic that we also should discuss with Russia, with China, and so forth. On malnutrition situation and what will be happening, the news from the OCHA are very concerning. We have been again on weekly contacts, but not only with our own ECHO, but with ICRC, with the World Food Programme, Mr. Beasley. We have talking to OCHA, we have been talking to UNHCR, other organizations, and I think the UN organizations have a very similar view as us of the situation, and OCHA has been very vocal on this possible famine, malnutrition that will occur when people cannot do their normal agricultural work and plant seeds and cannot go back to their houses and homes. So this is the situation. I hope I covered most of the topics. Of course, some questions are still very open. We try, of course, in these circumstances when we are working on the Tigray, at the same time try to advance on the Nile Dam, the Renaissance Dam issue, because it has to be solved also this summer, partly because its second filling is already ongoing, and we don't want to go to the situation where there are even military hostilities around the dam in the region. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Minister Haavisto, dear Pekka, thank you for your remarks. I would like to thank you for this interesting exchange of views and the first-hand information we have received from you. The Committee on Foreign Affairs, and I guess also the Committee on Development, will continue to follow closely the situation in Ethiopia and Sudan and all the neighbouring countries. The issues raised today will remain a high priority for our committees. And let me just add one sentence, Pekka. We strongly believe here in the European Parliament in the idea of Team Europe, that we're all in this together on foreign affairs, and that the European Parliament is also part of Team Europe. And what we like is that in your case now, the High Representative has tasked you as one of the 27 foreign ministers from a member state to take responsibility as special envoy for the whole EU in dealing with a crisis. I think this is a good role model, and I hope that we will see similar projects being realized in this term. So thank you once again, and the final word is with Thomas.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Minister Haavisto, for not only the role that you have taken on, but also, I would say, for the very interesting debate that we had with the MEPs. I remember personally, I think it was in October 2019, I had the opportunity to lead a mission of DEVE MEPs to Ethiopia, and I think I can speak for all of us that we came back from that trip. We felt a lot of hope, I would say, for Ethiopia. But of course, now this is not the first meeting that we're having about the worrying situation in Ethiopia, and I fear that this will not be the last one either. Humanitarian access conditions, yes, have improved if we compare it to the total lack of access that we had between November 2020 and early 2021. But everything, as you have pointed out yourself, everything is extremely uncertain and not to our satisfaction. Of course, the most important thing is that we need peace. The longer these conflicts last, the longer it will take for the reconstruction and the reconciliation of Ethiopia and also the wider region. And of course, this is of utmost important not only to the people of Ethiopia, but also, I would say, to the European Union. And I think the European Parliament and both the DEVE Committee and AFET Committee, we will continue to follow this closely, and hopefully we will see some progress in the near future. And by that, I think we can end this session. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best for our